Welcome to your Catholic Drive Time,
keeping you informed and inspired.
We love God, we ought to be able to talk about Him.
Getting you started on your day
with the latest in breaking news and information
from the Vatican to the White House and everything in between.
It's serious, it's fun, it's your Catholic Drive Time.
This is your host, Adrian Fonseca, and today, we're releasing this on Thanksgiving. If you're watching this after Thanksgiving, then hopefully it's still edifying. But I wanted to do a show on Thanksgiving. I'm not exactly an expert on Thanksgiving by any means, but I was reading an article from the New Liturgical Movement on Thanksgiving, and I wanted to share that article with you. So I'm just kind of going to go through it with you, and then I'm going to talk about the turkey indult. Many people, traditional Catholics, abstain from meat on Fridays, and they wonder, am I allowed to eat meat the day after Friday? And there's a rumor of this thing called the turkey indult, where you're allowed to eat turkey the day after Thanksgiving, so you can eat your leftovers. Is that true? Is it not? Well, I'll just tell you right now, it's not true, but there's an interesting story around it. So tune into the end to find out what that is. Okay, so here is the article from the New Liturgical Movement. If you're watching on YouTube, then you can see the actual video itself. I'm sharing my screen so you can see that. If you are listening, then you can't, but it's okay. You can just look up Thanksgiving Day Mass, thanks or no thanks, from the New Liturgical Movement, and it'll be in the description as well. Okay, Thanksgiving Day Mass by Michael Foley. I want to give credit to who deserves the credit. So I'm just going to go through this shortly. Even before the rise of cancel culture, Thanksgiving was under attack. No doubt this debate will escalate in the coming years. Yada yada yada. Let's go to the history of Thanksgiving, according to this article. The story of the first Anglo-American Thanksgiving is well known. In October 1621, in gratitude to God for the first successful harvest in the New World, the Pilgrims of the Plymouth colony held a 3-day banquet that was attended by 90 Native Americans and 53 Englishmen. Not as well known is that despite their hatred of popery, the Pilgrim celebration was indirectly inspired by the Catholic harvest celebration of the Middle Ages, especially the Dutch custom of serving goose on St. Martin's Day, which is November 11th. According to some scholars, when the Pilgrims who had spent time in Holland before landing on Plymouth ran out of geese for their feast, they supplemented the menu with a bird unique to North America, which is how we got from Martinmas goose to Thanksgiving turkey. That's interesting because I've never celebrated Martinmas. I didn't know that was a tradition in Martinmas, and the fact that the Pilgrims spent time in Holland before coming to Plymouth Rock is an interesting point to make, which would have been a popular site there to celebrate Martinmas. That's an interesting thing. I haven't never heard that before, but that's whether or not it's true. I mean, it's speculation. It's based off of what we've seen here, but that's less interesting to me than what comes later in this article. Other papist influences on the American Thanksgiving Day include the intriguing possibility that Squanto, this I have heard before. I've heard this many times. The liaison between Pilgrims and the local Pocanocets, I probably did not say that right, was a baptized Catholic having been converted by the Franciscans from the slave trade in Spain before returning to New England. That's very interesting. I have actually heard this many times that Squanto is actually Catholic, and there's different records on whether or not he actually did convert to Catholicism, whether or not he was evangelized, but it is not a crazy idea to think that he was, especially since he was educated as well. He obviously learned the language. He would have been evangelized because the people who would have taught him the language would have been the Franciscans, and they would have taught him the faith as well. It took time for Thanksgiving to become nationally recognized holiday that it is today. George Washington declared it a holiday on a Congress in 1789. Thanksgiving was celebrated intermittently during the first half of the 19th century. President Lincoln set the date as the last Thursday of November in 1863, but the holiday continued to depend on the will of the sitting president. From 1939 to 1941, for example, President Franklin D. Roosevelt moved Thanksgiving Day up 1 week earlier in order to extend the Christmas sale season. Jokes abounded during this period of Franksgiving that there was now a Democrat Thanksgiving, the new date, and a Republican, the traditional date. In 1942, Congress passed a law that made it the fourth Thursday of November the permanent date for Thanksgiving, removing it from the discretion of the executive branch. That's super interesting to me as well, because I also didn't know that. I thought it was just always the fourth Thursday of November. I had no idea that it was moved around and changed and abused in that way. Or I guess not abused. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but the fact that it was moved around and that the Democrats supported a new date and the Republicans supported a traditional, if you can call it traditional, if you call it that, a different date, and how it was moved for the sake of sales. That's also interesting because we get Black Friday the day after Thanksgiving, where you have the deals on sales, and that becomes a huge deal. That's very interesting that became that way. That we still kind of have Thanksgiving tied in with the consumerism, which is not a good thing. Other customs came gradually. Playing football on Thanksgiving became popular in the late 19th century and influenced the development of high school and professional leagues. Okay, it's speculated that the South, which had resisted Mr. Lincoln's holiday, eventually embraced Thanksgiving because of the irresistible allure of tossing the pigskin. Okay, yeah. So in the South, I'm located in Houston, Texas. It is a huge thing. It is a big thing in Texas to be playing football, especially on Thanksgiving. High school football, middle school football. I played football for over a decade, and sure enough, Texas football is taken very, very seriously. That's all I'm going to say on that. Catholic response. The Catholic observance of Thanksgiving also developed gradually. In 1858, the governor of New York declared the third Thursday of November of that year to be Thanksgiving. The next day, the New York Times reported, quote, with the exception of the Catholics, all religious denominations observed the day, and the churches during morning service were generally thronged. That's interesting. Let me look at that again. The Catholic observance of Thanksgiving also developed. The governor of New York declared that that's very interesting. By the early 20th century, however, American Catholics were not only following the Thanksgiving trend, but in some ways they were trying to lead it. Now, this is an interesting point, and the main reason why I want to read this article is this section right here of how can we take secular holidays and make them Catholic. Well, let's look. The Pilgrims of the Sacred Heart Review wryly noted in 1913 failed in their attempt to abolish the Catholic holiday of Christmas. Instead, they successfully added a holiday that Catholics could, in good conscience, observe. But the same article laments that Thanksgiving has to a great extent degenerated into a day of feeding and football games. This, mind you, in 1913. Now, this is a great critique of Thanksgiving. If Thanksgiving becomes nothing but a time to commit the mortal sin of gluttony and then the mortal sin of sloth, you sit around all day watching football games and eating, then what's the point of Thanksgiving? That's Thanksgiving ideally would be giving thanks to God for the wonderful benefits that he has have given to us. And if it becomes just a time to commit gluttony and sloth, then let's just get rid of it. Absolutely. Consequently, the article admonishes Catholics to be the ones who return Thanksgiving to its religious core and to be, quote, foremost in the observance of Thanksgiving Day, end quote, by starting with a morning mass, the greatest act of Thanksgiving that can be performed on earth. This is very important. It's something I think we should focus on. And when this comes out, you may have already missed Thanksgiving Day Mass, so you may not have a chance to go and attend Thanksgiving Mass. But if you have the opportunity to go to Mass today, go to Mass and receive the Blessed Sacrament and celebrate Thanksgiving, giving thanks to God for the wonderful benefits that he has bestowed upon us. And because there's no act of Thanksgiving that could be greater, because, what is the word Eucharist mean? Receiving the body and blood of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. The word Eucharist literally means Thanksgiving. It is the Thanksgiving feast. And I'll continue. At the time, Holy Mass had only recently become a common way for Catholics to observe Thanksgiving. Contemporary examples included a Pan-American Solemn High Mass of Thanksgiving held in St. Patrick's Church in Washington, D.C. that was customarily attended by Supreme Court justices, cabinet members, senators, and congressmen. But when President Woodrow Wilson agreed to attend in 1913, it was for some the last straw. Episcopalians, Lutherans, Baptists, and the Church of Christ protested that the Catholic hierarchy was passing the Thanksgiving Mass off as an official state event in order to show other nations, such as Italy, rife with potential Catholic immigrants, I don't know what that word means, that the United States is not a Protestant country, but a Roman Catholic country. this is very fascinating. By having Thanksgiving Day masses, and this was back in 1913 and earlier, by having these, they had President Woodrow Wilson, who was not a Catholic, go and attend Holy Mass. And mind you, in 1913, this is a traditional Latin Mass. They said it was a solemn high Mass of Thanksgiving. Now, what does that mean for us? Because one thing, and this is not the topic of the show today, but one thing I commonly hear is people saying, "Oh, we can't take people to Mass, in the Latin Mass, because you don't understand what's going on, and this, that, and the other." But here's a bunch of people, Supreme Court justices, cabinet members, senators, congressmen, the President of the United States, attending Holy Mass, a solemn high Mass that's all in Latin. These people know Latin? I doubt it. These people were Episcopalian, Lutherans, Baptists, and other things. And yet they were able to attend Holy Mass. And it didn't matter whether or not you understood the Latin parts. It's something special, it's something more important than understanding. It is recognition and giving thanks to God for the wonderful benefits that he gives us. And that's the primary thing that we have to keep in mind. And the other thing is that they're accusing them of wanting to show people that it is not a Protestant country, but a Roman Catholic country. This is brilliant. This is what we should be doing. We should be taking the United States, and making it into a Roman Catholic country. Less controversially, the same year, Bishop Camillus Paul Mays of Covington, Kentucky, decreed the following, quote, "We gladly avail ourselves of the official recognition of the nation's rulers of God's blessings upon the United States of America to call our faithful people before the altar of God. We hereby direct that on Thursday, November 27th, 1913, the pastors celebrate a high Mass of Thanksgiving at an hour deemed most convenient for the people of the parish. After Mass, they shall recite the prayers for authorities, that the people may join them in supplication to God for the spiritual welfare of the church and country. Immediately thereafter, benediction with the Blessed Sacrament shall be given and be followed by a solemn Te Deum," which is a solemn prayer, which if you never pray the Te Deum, that is another great way to celebrate Thanksgiving, is pray the Te Deum. Beautiful prayer and song. If you can get it sung, if you can listen to it, look it up online. You can listen to it. It's absolutely stunning. Very recommended. This is important as well. This is beautiful. What do they do? Instead of creating this like Thanksgiving Day Mass that you're referring to America, instead you're just taking something that's American, and instead of like creating something new, some kind of Frankenstein monster of the Mass and secular culture. No, instead they're praying the Mass of Thanksgiving, which already exists. We already have masses that are written in order to give thanks to God, masses of thanksgiving to God. Then afterwards they do the prayers for authorities, which is something that already exists. We already have those prayers, and we can pray those anytime, but this is a great day to pray them. And 3, to pray the Te Deum, if we can, and that's with benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. Because why are we giving thanks? We're giving thanks to God because of his benefits, because of what he did, not because of what man did, but because of what God did. The Catholic embrace of Thanksgiving even reached beyond American shores. In 1902, 4 years after the Philippines became a de facto U.S. colony in the wake of the Spanish-American War, the Church on the archipelago acquiesced to its new rulers by celebrating a solemn high Mass on Thanksgiving Day in the Cathedral of Manila. Yet Thanksgiving Day could also be an occasion for exercising critical patriotism. In the same cathedral, 14 years later, Bishop Hurth of Vigan rebuked bigotry and quoted Washington Thanksgiving Day proclamation saying, quote, "But the Father of our country wished that together with giving thanks to the Almighty, we should also concern ourselves with those things that might make us undeserving of the divine favors. Washington wants us to be concerned also with our national sins." That's very interesting. I'm curious to hear some people's analysis of that quote, because, I mean, it kind of has a lot of buzzwords that we hear in the 21st century. This happened, what did they say, in 1902? That's very interesting that happened in 1902, and I wonder what is meant here. I'd be very curious. Tell me what you think about this particular quote. I can see this in a good way. I could see this interpreted in a positive manner. A yet greater development occurred 6 years later. Thanksgiving Day praised by the Pope touted a New York Times headline in 1922. For the first time in the history of the Catholic Church, the Pope joined in an American national festival when he insisted on receiving 180 students from the North American College in Rome and said to them,
Hey Donnie, what are the mysteries that we pray on the rosary?
Glorious, luminous, joyful,
And
sorrowful.
there you go. As parents, we're the primary educators of our Catholic faith to our children, and if you don't know your Catholic faith as well as you should, that's okay. Just tune in daily to the Guadalupe Radio Network by logging online to grnonline.com. The Guadalupe Radio Network. Listen, learn, love, and pass it on.
This is Dale Ahlquist with a Chesterton Minute. Have you ever heard someone say, "We should not blame people for whatever bad things they may sometimes do. We should not judge them for their faults. We should be kind and merciful"? Well, of course we should be kind and merciful. However, it is not merciful to say that we should not blame them for the sins they commit. As G.K. Chesterton says, blame is actually a compliment. It is a compliment because it is an appeal to a man's soul. When we call a man a coward, we are, in so doing, asking him how he can be a coward when he could be a hero. When we rebuke a man for being a sinner, we imply that he has the potential of being a saint. Want more than a minute? Visit our website, chesterton.org.
National Thanksgiving. It is a noble idea on the part of your people, choosing the day for prayer. Men who lack prayer lack one of the essentials of life. Your country must indeed be blessed by Almighty God. It is consoling to see the heads of nations fixing days for the people to pray to and thank God for blessings received. Nations doing this cannot but prosper materially and spiritually. I am with you, with your people. On the day of Thanksgiving, we are praying together. Now that is a very beautiful sentiment because he's taking a reality that is Thanksgiving Day holiday. That's something that exists. It's something that's celebrated in America. And he's interpreting it in the most charitable way possible, saying that it is amazing that your people take this day to be a day of prayer. And now what we talked about earlier is that, many people are using this as a day for gluttony and sloth. But Pius, who did it say? Which pope was it? It was Pius I guess that's 11th. He was saying this can be God. Like man made this for evil, but God can make it for good. Now, this wasn't obviously made for evil, but it became evil. But what man intended for evil, God intended for good. And this is something that is true in the spiritual life constantly. The Pope in November 1922 was Pius XI, and the author of the powerful 1925 encyclical Quas Primas, which is here it is, an institutor of the original feast of Christ the King. The great pontiff who promoted the social reign of Jesus Christ the King was endorsing the American holiday of Thanksgiving, apparently deeming it compatible with his own convictions. Pope Pius XII was also a fan of the American holiday, addressing a group of visiting U.S. congressmen on Thanksgiving Day in 1949. The Pope said, quote, "Our heart is touched and comforted by this recurring evidence, and would that it were universal of one of the very first charges linked to the mission of responsible statesmanship. It is truly just and right everywhere to give thanks to God for the blessings of life, liberty, and abundance." That word liberty, we might need to do a whole show on that word liberty, life, liberty, and abundance, because there's a confusion that happens when we talk about the word liberty in relation to the church as opposed to libertism or liberalism. They're different things, and it's important to note, but not enough time to go into right now. Oddly, the press misconstrued Pius's desire to see a universal custom of statesmen giving thanks to God and reported that the Pope had asked the world to observe the United States' traditional Thanksgiving Day. Now, that's an interesting note, is to say that what Pius XI said here, or Pius XII rather, said here was not that every country should have a Thanksgiving Day, but instead that it should be a universal custom that statesmen stop and spend a day to give thanks to God. That's what he meant here. But did Pius XII also grant a turkey indult that allowed the U.S. Catholics to eat flesh meat the day after Thanksgiving, as it is often alleged? The answer is no. Beginning in 1931, the Holy See granted American bishops the faculty to dispense from the laws of fast and or abstinence on civil holidays. The bishops, however, rarely took advantage of it, and the faculty moreover, the faculty they received did not include the day after a civil holiday. And the closest thing that this person could find in the article, the quote is here. It says a turkey indult in 1965, quote, Roman Catholics in the Archdiocese of New York will hear the announcement at tomorrow's Mass that on the Friday following Thanksgiving, they need not refrain from eating meat. The dispensation granted by each bishop with the power from the Vatican will probably be in effect in most American dioceses. So that's saying that the bishops had permission to dispense people, but not every bishop did. Less than a year later, so this is also important, and this is why the answer is kind of maybe. Less than a year later, the church would no longer require Friday abstinence under pain of sin except during Lent. Current canon law defines Friday as an obligatory day of penance, the standard form of which is abstinence from flesh meat. Other forms of penances, however, may be done instead. If then one wishes to enjoy turkey and cranberry sandwiches on Black Friday, one can, by doing some other form of penance besides abstinence. The 1931 Vatican letter concerning the civic holiday Indult recommends making some offering, especially in favor of the poor. Now, before I move on to this article, I want to go over here real quick and look at the turkey indult. It is noted that the turkey indult, what is called the turkey indult, never actually existed. And actually, let me see, this article here was written by Gregory DePeppo on the mythical Pius XII's Thanksgiving indult. Great article by Sharon Cabell. This is important. This article is very good if you want to hear the history of the turkey indult and the question here, because the only evidence that we found, that the person here found of the turkey indult, was a question box from Father Daniel Brennan. And the reader asked, I am wondering why a dispensation was not given for the Friday after Thanksgiving this year, or why one was given last year. Father Brennan responds, and this is a great response for anybody today who's wondering about a kind of like ecclesiastical laws. He says, if you would insist that there is a good cause for such dispensation because the Holy Father granted it in 1958, I would remind you that the Pope does not need a justifying reason to dispense from mere church law. And in granting the relaxation of the abstinence on the Friday after Thanksgiving in 1958, which proves that it did happen, he set no precedent but granted a particular favor for a particular year. This would seem to be the first documented instance. Okay, there it goes. So if you're watching, you can see the excerpt from the newspaper. So this is important. This article goes on to talk about the history of indults in America, which is very, very fascinating to see how indults started becoming more and more popular, and so people started getting more and more days where they had it really set the stage in the 50s and the time leading up to the 60s and the 70s to get rid of abstinence on Fridays altogether, and leading to it only being in Thanksgiving, which is what we have today. So I don't want to go into that whole thing unless we have time. Let's see, how much time have we already used so far? It's only been 20 minutes. That's not too bad. Maybe we can come back to this and look at this article as well if we have time. It's also important to note that when this happened, the Pius XII was already dead. So Pius XII, if this happened in 1958, because it says the Holy Father and it says the Pope, so people just assumed it was Pius XII because he lived during that time. But Pius XII died on October 9th, 1958, and John the 23rd took office in October 28th, 1958. So the likelihood is that it would have actually been John the 23rd who gave this indult, not Pius XII. So that's interesting. I may come back to this article in a second. Let's see how long it takes me to get through the rest of this article, which was the main article I wanted to cover. Thanksgiving Day after the Second Vatican Council. Shortly after the Civil War, the New York Times explained that although Catholics were sure to enjoy their Thanksgiving dinner, their religion will not permit the use of the forms of their church in commemoration of a secular holiday. That's very interesting. Their religion will not permit the use of the forms of their church in commemoration of a secular holiday. So it seems to say that they do not want a Thanksgiving Mass, a Thanksgiving Day Mass. Interesting. As is usual with the Times coverage of Catholicism, they got it half right. Okay, so this is the New York Times covering this. Okay, it's not the church saying this. That's okay. That's something to point out. I'm glad they clarified that. And it said right here too, and I just didn't read properly. They got it half right. We have already seen that the church can and did offer a Mass of Thanksgiving on this day. The traditional Roman Missal also includes several votive masses suitable for the occasion, such as Mass for Peace and diverse orations, such as prayers for the country's rulers. Finally, priests can celebrate a votive Mass in honor of our nation's patron saint, which since 1847 has been Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. I'm going to do a whole show on the Immaculate Conception, and I already did a show kind of on this, but there was more of a like, do we believe Immaculate Conception, yada yada, that kind of thing. I'm going to do a show with Gabriel Castillo. I'm going to invite him. I'm probably going to go to him, to his office in Sugarland, and we're going to talk, and we're going to go over Mary maximalism, and that's a different topic entirely, but I just wanted to tease that. But the Times was correct insofar as Catholic worship does not directly incorporate secular holidays into its liturgical calendar. This is very important. I'm going to reread this, and I'm going to read it slowly, because this is going to be an important point to note between the history of the Catholic Church in America until 1968. But the Times was correct insofar as Catholic worship does not directly incorporate secular holidays into its liturgical calendar. That is, until after the Second Vatican Council. In November 1968, a subcommittee of the American Bishops' Committee on the Liturgy composed a, quote, special Thanksgiving Day Mass that speaks, quote, directly to the American understanding of the annual Thanksgiving observance, end quote. The new Mass was first celebrated in November 1969 and has since undergone two revisions. The 1968 propers were replaced with new or expanded prayers, and the 1974 and 1985 American editions of the sacramentary, and these in turn were replaced in the 2011 edition. You all probably remember, or maybe people remember the earlier change too, but I remember, I was young and I'm old enough to remember the 2011 changes, which was crazy. Whenever that happened, everybody was freaking out, like trying to figure out, and there were small changes too, but it was crazy when it happened. I would have been, I guess, 11 when that happened, 12, 13, 12. I would have been 12. All three versions succeed in speaking directly of the American understanding of Thanksgiving Day, but to what degree they speak directly of a Catholic understanding of things is a matter of some debate. The 1968 preface, for example, proclaims, quote, "It has come to pass in each generation for all who have believed that Jesus by his death and resurrection gave them a new freedom in his spirit. It happened to our fathers who came to this land as if out of the desert into a place of promise and hope," end quote. For those whose ears have been tuned by the sacred liturgy, the reference to our fathers is out of key. Our fathers, Patris Nostri, in the Roman Rites traditional prayers, meant not our fathers of the flesh, and still less of our nation, but our fathers in the faith. See, that's interesting, because immediately when I read this, I had to remind myself this is about Thanksgiving, right? So when it says here, it happened to our fathers who came to this land as if out of the desert into a place of promise and hope, it is equating the fathers of America, the founding fathers of America, to the desert fathers, out of the desert into a place of promise and hope, to the desert fathers of the church and the founding fathers, the church fathers, the apostolic fathers of the faith. That's not good. That's bad. The founding fathers, while they may be great men, but they may even be brilliant men, and some of them even very venerable men, virtuous men, they were not saints. And a lot of them were against the church, the Catholic Church. We can't raise them to the standard of the church fathers. I'm going to continue. If the preface is referring to our founding fathers, it should be recalled that many of them were deists who denied the resurrection. If it is referring to the Pilgrims, it should be recalled that they believed that freedom in the spirit meant freedom from the papacy. And if it is referring to our immigrant forebears, it should be recalled that not all Americans have ancestors who came here freely or experienced it as a place of promise or hope. Okay, that last part, Okay, sure, whatever. That's more of a reference to like slavery, but I guess it's true, but now it is. It's always been a place of promise of hope, but it wasn't for those people who were brought over as slaves. Yeah, that's true. The 1968 preface, however, is nothing in comparison with that of the 1974-1985 impishly dubbed by priests and seminarians of the time as the, quote, Manifest Destiny preface. Yikes. Because of its reputed endorsement of the belief that God wanted the American people to rule from sea to shining sea.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. In your view, was the Virgin Mary simply an obedient woman who willingly gave biological and maternal matter to Jesus and therefore has been given undue adoration? So here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, the Bible. The Virgin Mary is in the first book of the Bible, the last book of the Bible, all through the Gospels, and close to 15 other typologies throughout Scripture. Secondly, the Ark of the Covenant. It was the most revered object in the history of the children of Israel. That ark carried the presence of God. Well, goodness, the Virgin Mary did not just carry the presence of God, she carried God himself. Thirdly, something to think on. If God is a father, he is, and we are known as his children, we are, and the body of Christ are called brothers and sisters, they are, wouldn't God provide a mother for his church? He did. So here's an idea. Ask a wartime veteran who soldiers cry out for in a moment of fear. That's right, their mother. Mother Mary, pray for us.
I don't know why I turned on my radio because I've kept my radio off for years. And once I turned it on, I was absolutely hooked. I love the shows with a Catholic apologist. I love the shows with the sort of day-to-day psychologist, Greg and Lisa Popchak. I love hearing not just of other people's problems who call in, but I love getting the Catholic take on how to deal with day-to-day reality.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.
It was this doctrine that was largely responsible for the U.S.'s unjust military conflicts in the 19th century, from the Mexican-American War to the extirpation of the American Indian. So, I don't know a lot about this, the Mexican-American War or the extirpation of the American Indians. I'm assuming it refers to like the Trail of Tears and things like that. I'm not going to comment on whether or not that was a just or unjust war, or whether or not anything about that, because I just don't know enough about it. I'm sure I can find someone to talk about it if I really wanted to. And if you're interested in that thing, let me know. If you want to hear about that conflict in particular, I can find a guest and we can talk about it, because not my area of expertise. Retaining the lofty cant about our fathers from 1968, the 1970 preface goes on to say, quote, "Once you chose a people and gave them a destiny, and when you brought them out of bondage to freedom, they carried with them the promise that all men would be blessed and all men could be free," end quote. Besides the infelicious, I don't know what that word means, a use of the word destiny, the preface of this mass, as Father Thomas Kochik pointed out, plays into distinctively American misconstrual of divine election that confuses Christian hope with American exceptionalism and belief that God has given the USA a special mission to be a shining city upon a hill, through which, like the covenant made with Abraham, all nations will be blessed. A baptized Catholic is perfectly free to believe this or not, but he may have good reasons not to, for it implies that America, rather than the Church, had her 7 sacraments and God's agent of salvation on earth. For it implies that America, rather than the Church and her 7 sacraments, is God's agent of salvation on earth. Yeah, you see that a lot, where people kind of think that America is going to save the world. And America, I love my country. I think that the country is amazing. I think that America's the best place to live on earth. But it's true that America is not going to save anyone. It's not going to save anyone's soul. In fact, we spread wicked things, LGBT ideology and the like, across the world, abortion all over the world. And we have to answer for that as a nation. And if he is free not to believe it, and perhaps wise not to, why was this inessential, controversial, and potentially dangerous doctrine enshrined in the solemn worship of the Church? According to the principle of lex orandi, lex credendi, if the Church is praying it in her liturgy, she truly believes it. But should all Catholics believe this as an article of faith? Consider how ridiculous it sounds to our Catholic brethren in other parts of the world, and how offensive it must be to the Native American converts. Okay. Fortunately, the Manifest Destiny preface was replaced with more Christocentric language in 2011, but since the new preface also doubles down on American ideals and is not above criticism, quote, "You have entrusted to us the great gift of freedom, a gift that calls forth responsibility and commitment to the truth that all have a fundamental dignity before you," end quote. Fine, and how does a civics lesson help us prepare for the next part of the Mass, the sacrifice of lamb without blemish? Another oddity of the new Masses is that they do not actually give thanks to God. The collect in the 1974 and 1985 edition, which is retained in the 2011, includes the lines, "On Thanksgiving Day, we come before you with gratitude for your kindness," but does not go on to thank God for the bounties of the year. Instead, it, in the other prayers, asks for the greater concern for our fellow man. The 1974, 1985, and 2011 prayers after communion also neglect to thank God and end with the odd petition, "Help us to reach out in love to all your people so that we may share with them the goods of time and eternity." The 2011 version says the good things of time and eternity. Usually when orations in the traditional Mass mention temporal and eternal goods, it is to graduate from the former to the latter rather than be dispensers of both. And how a layman can be a dispenser of eternal goods is an interesting question. But even the preface, which normally begins with, "It is truly just and right everywhere to give thanks to God," in which Pius XII quoted when he speaks of the American Thanksgiving, is missing this key phrase in the new version. Why would you remove one of the Mass's few references to Thanksgiving from your Thanksgiving Day Mass? Fortunately, the verse was restored in 2011, and the Mass of Thanksgiving in the 1962 Roman Missal, by contrast, gives thanks to God in our collect and in the post-communion. We beseech God in the secret to receive, quote, "our sacrifice of thanksgiving." The new rite's vote of Mass for giving thanks to God is also consistently better in this regard. Almost done with this article. We probably have like 30 minutes at this point. Let me check to see how much time we've covered. Yeah, it's about 33 minutes. We should get you out before an hour up. On a peripheral note, the Thanksgiving Day Mass tend to attract music that is unsuitable for the sacred liturgy and even sacrilegious. Rather than the Te Deum, which I highly recommend, go into YouTube, look up the Te Deum and listen to it. Listen to different versions of it too. I think OP Chant, Te Deum OP Chant, you can listen to it there, is one of my favorites. Cherished by the churches for centuries, parishes tend to perform patriotic music that makes little or no mention of God, and that instead extols the nation. At least God Bless America asks God to bless America, but other choices such as "My Country 'Tis of Thee" fail to invoke God until the fourth verse. And how many Catholic congregations ever get to the fourth verse at a weekday morning Mass? That's a good point. It's something that we should do a whole show on too. I mean, we did, if you go back to the very, very early shows that I did with my friend Frater Garion at the time, Max. He was a music major and a master's in sacred music, and we went through and we talked about sacred music. And this is a very important point that needs to be emphasized about the importance of music in Mass, because the music is pernicious in the sense that bad music you can't block out. When there's something scandalous in front of you, you can avert your eyes. You can keep custody of the eyes. But your ears, you cannot keep custody of the ears without just leaving the room or plugging them up with, like, even when you plug it up, sound gets through. You can never fully divert your ears unless you just remove yourself from the situation. So it's very pernicious in that sense that it's piercing. It speaks directly to the soul, which is why we need good music, especially this holy sacrifice. Finally, the Thanksgiving Day Mass, even though it is technically a votive Mass at a fixed time, appears in the sacramentary and on official calendars as part of the propers of saints. The traditional liturgical year also has fixed votive Masses, such as those for the Ember and Rogation days, but these occasions have been thoroughly consecrated, even though some of their petitions are for temporal goods, such as fair weather or a good harvest. There is nothing jarring about seeing an Ember Day on the calendar. It fits in effortlessly with the rest of the liturgical season. The Thanksgiving Day, on the other hand, retains without alteration the name and character of a secular holiday. A celebration begun by anti-Catholic Puritan separatists sits on the church's sacred calendar, nestled among the feast days of the saints, thereby giving the impression that all are on the same level. That impression is only dependent on the prayers of this Mass itself, which obsequiously, meaning like veiled or hard to see, cavil to American self-regard. In the Catholic Church, liturgically speaking, every day of the year is Thanksgiving Day, writes Father Francis Weiser, for every day is an opportunity to celebrate the Eucharist, derived from the Greek word for thanksgiving. Yet Weiser also acknowledges a psychological need for special manifestations of gratitude. In the Middle Ages, exceptionally splendid masses of thanksgiving would be offered at the end of public crisis like an epidemic, a war, or natural disaster. And fixed annual Thanksgiving masses would be held after the harvest. Mindful of this history, the U.S. Church over a century ago began to give due recognition to Thanksgiving Day, for there is nothing wrong with designating a day of national thanksgiving, even when it is by a secular government. But in all these cases, as we saw with the directives of Kentucky Bishop Mays, the Catholic hymn of thanksgiving, the Te Deum, would conclude the Mass. In all these cases, the faithful would thank Almighty God without any admixture of erroneous or dubious historical claims in their solemn prayers. And in all these cases, a worldly occasion was subsumed into a spiritual act rather than the reverse. There is much for which to be grateful as a citizen of the United States of America, but not at the cost of polluting or compromising Catholic dogma with a nationalistic ideology. A Mass of Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving Day? Yes, please. A Thanksgiving Day Mass? No, thank you. End of the article. So I think that's a great article. I think it's brilliant. I would highly recommend checking it out for yourself if you're interested at all in this topic. Go and read it yourself and look at some of the links that it leads to, because there's tons more to be said here about this topic. But the one thing I want to take away is that we can, in fact, reclaim these holidays, and not reclaim, but take over. Like, there is a legitimate way of which we can enculturate the gospel, and we can enculturate the nation. So we can take things that were intended to be secular, and there's not anything that's preventing us from taking that and baptizing it and making it Catholic. And that's what the church was doing for hundreds of years. And we shouldn't kowtow to the state. We shouldn't give in to the state, but we can take what the state is already doing and recognize the good of it. We can reject the evil of it, take the good of it, but not turn the liturgy into some Frankenstein monster that conforms to society. Instead, we take society and we conform it to the church. So, okay, we have a Thanksgiving Day holiday, a national Thanksgiving Day holiday. How do we celebrate that as Catholics? Well, we go to Holy Mass, we give thanks to God, we offer the Te Deum, we pray these prayers, we sing these songs, we pray the Rosary, all these things directed towards something that is greater than ourselves, that gives thanks to God, who deserves our thanks, who deserves our praise and adoration. Like that, those are the primary things that we should be doing in our lives.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Your church most likely has a praise and worship time. Would you be surprised to know that the songs you sing might have nothing to do with worship? So here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, history. Praise and worship was not a term used until the mid-60s, when the Jesus people music started becoming more complex and contemporary. By the late 70s, praise and worship had become an entire entity of its own. Secondly, what is worship? It's a sacrifice. It's not singing a soft, flowy song with hands raised. The New Testament writers understood that worship was a sacrifice, that it occurred on an altar, which was and is known as a place of slaughter. Thirdly, the altar is for you. Jesus, in the holy sacrifices of the Mass, invites you to participate in His timeless sacrifice of love that truly occurs on the altar. No nightclub effects, no entertainment, no pumped-up emotion. Oh, and please don't register for the next Praise and Worship Global Seminar. Why? Because you can't teach praise and it won't include worship. Yikes!
Hey Donnie, name 4 of the 7 sacraments.
Baptism, confession.
That's right, reconciliation.
Communion, and confirmation.
As parents, we're the primary educators of our Catholic faith to our children, and if you don't know your Catholic faith as well as you should, that's okay. Just tune in daily to the Guadalupe Radio Network by logging online to grnonline.com. The Guadalupe Radio Network. Listen, learn, love, and pass it on.
Not asking for things from God, but giving thanks for the things He has already done for us. Let's see, we're at 40 minutes. I think I have enough time to go over the turkey indult just a little bit anyways. So let's do that real quick. And if you're not interested, you can skedaddle if you want. If you are interested, well, here we're going to go over the turkey indult a little bit. And all these things will be linked in the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or on your podcast feed, it'll be in the description. Let's see, the turkey indult, the Guardian 1966. Okay, so here is a brief aside on a current penance rules. And this is important. This is probably the most important part because this is the answer to, are we as Catholics in 2021 allowed to eat meat on the Friday after Thanksgiving? And I'm going to read to you what they said here. This seems to be a fitting moment to mention that the existence or non-existence of this legendary turkey indult does not have any impact on the current obligations in place for Catholics in the U.S. And the current 1983 Code of Canon Law clearly states that the Universal Church, quote, abstinence from meat or from some other food as determined by the Episcopal Conference is to be observed on all Fridays unless its solemnity should fall on a Friday. However, so right there, the 1983 Code of Canon Law says every person is to observe abstinence from meat or from some other food as determined by the Episcopal Conference on all Fridays. That's important to note. Every Catholic is bound to do this. Abstain from meat on Fridays. That's what it says there. It's a little bit more nuanced, and I'm about to get to that. But essentially, yes, we are still obliged to abstain from meat on Fridays. However, the current code also allows the National Episcopal Conference to, quote, substitute other forms of penances, especially works of charity, exercises of piety, in whole or in part, for abstinence and fast. In the United States, the Episcopal Conference issued a document in 1966 stating, quote, Friday should be in each week something of what Lent is in the entire year. For this reason, we urge all to prepare for that weekly Easter that comes with each Sunday by freely making of every Friday a day of self-denial and mortification and prayerful remembrance of the Passion of Jesus Christ. Among the works of voluntary self-denial and personal penance, which we especially commend to our people for the future observance of Friday, even though we hereby terminate the traditional law of abstinence binding under pain of sin as the sole prescribed means of observing Friday, except during Lent. We give first place to abstinence from flesh meat. We do so in the hope that the Catholic community will ordinarily continue to abstain from meat by free choice, as formerly we did in obedience to church law, end quote. That is very idealistic, I would say being charitable, and devious if I'm not being charitable, because he essentially said, yes, I think all Catholics should continue to abstain from meat on Fridays, but, we don't want to bind you by mortal sin. We're just going to say you're required to do it, you should desire to do it, but, if you don't do it, it's not a sin. Whenever you tell someone that, they're immediately going to think, okay, well, then I don't have to do it, and they don't do it. And that's why so many traditional Catholics do abstain from meat on Fridays, and so many people who want to follow these traditional practices just do it anyways, because they're doing it out of love of God, and they recognize, it's no sin if I don't do it otherwise, but I desire to keep these fast. I desire to be Catholic like our fathers were before us. The article goes on, therefore it is clear that while all Catholics should offer a fitting sacrifice each week on Friday and should view abstinence from meat as the ancient, fitting, and primary way to offer the sacrifice, it is no longer an obligation in the United States that binds under pain of sin. As an interesting aside, while most countries in the 1960s did indeed jettison the obligation to abstinence from meat, there is a clear trend of Catholics around the world desiring to return to traditional practice. In 2011, the Catholic bishops of England and Wales restored the traditional obligations to Friday abstinence under pain of sin. I did not know that. Go England and Wales. Praise be to God. Okay, so I know Poland also, you don't eat meat on Fridays. Okay, let's see. That's the rundown. There's your answer. So that means you have to make up your mind whether you want to eat meat on the Friday after Thanksgiving. It's up to you, as you're not committing a mortal sin. And if you want to still, follow the law, okay, well, eat meat and then do something else. Wake up early, go to mass bright and early in the morning, pray 4 rosaries that day, donate your money to a charitable cause, do something to make up for not eating meat or for eating meat that day. Okay. So I read to you all this excerpt from Father Brennan on the question box on Thanksgiving, so I'm going to skip that a little bit, and I'm going to go into this section, which I think is very interesting, on the history of indults in America. And welcome to Catholic Drive Time. This is your host, Adrian Fonseca. It's so good to be on with you today. Praise be to God. And we have a special treat for you today. We are, speaking of which, of All Saints Day. Today is, in fact, All Saints Day. So we are off today, but we have a pre-recorded interview with Bishop Pfeiffer, who is an expert on Venerable Mary of Agreda. Now, maybe you've heard of Venerable Mary of Agreda. Maybe you haven't. In fact, most people, which is shocking to me, has never heard of the Lady in Blue, the Venerable Mary of Agreda. And she's one of the patrons of Texas. And if you do know who she is, many people only know her for The Mystical City of God, which is a wonderful book, and many people don't even know her from that either. But joining us to talk about who this wonderful woman is Bishop Pfeiffer. Good morning to you, Your Excellency.
Good morning, Adrian. It's a joy to be with you, and thank you for the good ministry you do with Guadalupe Radio.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to do it. Now, Your Excellency, let's start from your connection to this wonderful woman. How did you end up finding out about this Venerable Mary of Agreda?
Well, I've heard about her when I was a seminarian, before I was a priest, and was impressed by the story that I read and heard about. And then in my priesthood 39 years ago, I was named to be the bishop of the Catholic Diocese of San Angelo, Texas, which is north of San Antonio, about 225 miles. And right away when I was there, I kept hearing about the Lady in Blue. In fact, the county judge, this is 39 years ago, I was a new bishop there, said they were going to move a marker from the Concho River. And the marker talked about the apparition of the Lady in Blue in that area. And he said, I think you ought to be there to officiate this. Well, I was thrilled. So I did my little more reading on the Lady in Blue and was fascinated by the story. Ever since then, I decided that since this wonderful woman sent by God appeared in what is Texas today, West Texas, and New Mexico, perhaps part of Arizona, that I ought to find out more about her. So I constantly read more about her and started to promote devotion to her, and even went to Agreda about 15 years ago to pay a personal visit. I understand you've been there too, and visited with the community, and the sisters there gave me wonderful stories about her life and these mystical experiences she had. She died in 1665, and she was buried in their beautiful chapel that goes back to, my gosh, several centuries ago. And then, let's see, I'm not sure the exact, how long ago, over 100 years ago, they exhumed her body, and it was incorrupt, and it's now placed on the side of the altar in their chapel. So that's kind of how I got into the beautiful story, The Lady in Blue, and I'm still working on it, promoting the best way I can her canonization.
What a beautiful thing. And I was very blown away. Like you had mentioned, I had the privilege myself and my family took a trip out to Agreda, Spain, and got to spend a day in the convent going around the area. And it's an absolutely tremendous thing, especially her body. Seeing the incorrupt body is absolutely jaw-dropping experience. Now, most people may have never heard of Venerable Mary of Agreda and don't know her life. And so tell me about who this woman was. She came from, honestly, I would be in favor of canonizing her entire family, a very holy family. Can you tell me about who this woman was, her early life, and maybe a little bit about her family?
Sure. Well, I tell people after years of working on her cause that the church is trying to catch up, which God has done centuries ago. Without a doubt, this woman is in heaven. I offer a prayer to her very frequently, praying for her canonization and praying to her. But what impressed me was the sanctity of this beautiful woman. Sor Maria de Agreda, she was just a little peasant girl, didn't have much formal education. And as time went on, when she was in her early 20s, they were forming a community, and which developed later on into a rather big community. But at the time, they didn't have a convent. So it started off in her home, her mother and father's home. That's where she began. And then it developed into what is like a Franciscan Carmelite community. And you've been to that house, and I've been there too. And as time went on, this young sister, by then she was a member of the community, a religious, and she was named to be the superior at the age of 22, 23. And she remained as the superior. They kept reelecting her for almost the rest of her life. And shortly after this, in 1620, when they did move into the convent that you went to, and which I have seen, Sor Maria de Agreda, they call her Sor Maria, Sister Sor Maria de Jesus, Sister Mary of Jesus of Agreda. Agreda is a town where the convent is. She was having these mystical experiences, and it's like she would be transported to a whole different place in the world. And later on, she realized where she was appearing by the grace of God and the power of God, that that was what we call the New World then. It didn't have the name Texas, New Mexico. That came much later. And for some reason, God chose her in these mystical experiences to appear to the native people there, mainly to the Humano native people, and gave them messages about Christianity. And about that time, a little bit later, the Franciscans moved into that area, what is now West Texas and New Mexico, bringing Christianity. So they thought, and they did, but already this marvelous woman, they called her, the natives called her the Lady in Blue, who appeared to them because she wore a blue mantle, and from that they called her the Lady in Blue. But the natives received messages from this Lady in Blue about Christianity, Catholicism, and she asked them to go visit these new people called missionaries, and they did. And when they first went to meet the missionaries, the Franciscans, this is in like 1620, 21, they asked for baptism. Well, the missionaries were just puzzled. How did they know about baptism? They didn't have helicopters bringing people in back then. And the missionaries started to receive these people. They kept coming back and back, sometimes with crosses. They would ask, well, who told you about the cross? They kept saying, this Lady in Blue. And they asked, well, what was she doing? They said, well, she would appear to us suddenly, a beautiful lady, a very kind lady, and bring us messages that we never heard about before.
So many of us carry such heavy burdens.
She's having a relationship with George. It's disgusting.
Deep within, we struggle because sin separates us from God. But thanks to the grace of confession, God compassionately listens, forgives, and sets us free. So if it's been a while since you've been to confession or Mass, come home and experience a fresh start. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Who did God use to get John the Baptist filled with the Holy Spirit? Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Here's your choices. Could it have been Simeon or St. Joseph or maybe an unknown prophet? Maybe Jesus? Who was it? Your answer in a moment. Secondly, so what methods do we see in the New Testament for Christians receiving the Holy Spirit? Well, it was usually through the laying on of hands. Peter and John laid hands on those in Samaria. St. Paul laid hands on those believers in Ephesus. Prior to that, we see Jesus merely breathing on the apostles. So here's your answer. A greeting. Yes, a greeting. You see, after Gabriel's powerful annunciation to the Virgin Mary, a simple, profound greeting from Mary to Elizabeth caused John the Baptist to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And as a result, he leaped in her womb. Now, to all my daring Pentecostal church friends, no matter how much you pray in tongues over someone, this method won't work. Why? Because it's not a method. It was the divine team of the Blessed Trinity, Gabriel, Mary, and Elizabeth, and that, my friend, will not happen again.
I actually was gone from the Catholic Church for 35 years. I want to get to heaven. I don't know if I will. I worry about it. But I not only want to get to heaven at the moment of my death, I want to find as much heaven as possible here on earth. So I need help. I don't know why I turned on my radio because I've kept my radio off for years. And once I turned it on, I was absolutely hooked.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul. All Catholic, all the time. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.
And the Franciscans were puzzled, and their superior, Father Benavides, he started to record the number of times the native people came to visit him asking about Christianity, Catholicism, and he registered over 500 times when the native people came inquiring about Catholicism or deepening their understanding because the Lady in Blue had taught them so much. So it's just a marvelous experience. This went on through 1621, and Father Benavides recorded all of this. And about that time, new missionaries were coming in from Spain. They came from Spain. They would go to Mexico City and then walk or go on a donkey up through what we call now Texas, New Mexico. And they were bringing a story about a marvelous woman in Spain, in the province of Soria, from the city of Agreda, saying that this nun claimed she had mystical experiences about a new place, a new world. And Father Benavides, after so many apparitions, went back to Spain because he heard about these messages coming from there, and he and his superior interviewed her, Sor Maria de Jesus de Agreda, about these mystical experiences she had, and he wrote them down in a book called The Memoirs. You ought to read that book because it's fascinating. It's the two priests talking to her, and I want to just point out here that this was a tough period in Christianity in Spain, but they interviewed her and recorded everything, and Father wrote it down in a book called his Memoirs about these tremendous experiences that this young nun had and bringing message of Christianity, what we call the New World today, specifically Texas, New Mexico, and part of Arizona.
Wow. That is absolutely tremendous. Joining me right now is Bishop Michael Pfeiffer. He is the retired Bishop of San Angelo and a great advocate for the canonization of Venerable Mary of Agreda. Today is All Saints Day, and we have the day off so we can go to Holy Mass. And so I figured, what better thing to do on All Saints Day, which is a day dedicated to all the saints, especially those who don't have official feast days to be recognized, to talk about someone who is not yet a canonized saint, but hopefully someday soon will be, Venerable Mary of Agreda. One thing about her, and we could talk for hours about this wonderful woman, but one thing I wanted to ask you about, Your Excellency, is her appearances in the New World. The question was presented at the time with the Inquisition, and it's still kind of a question to me, is how exactly did she appear in the New World? Some were saying that she bilocated. Some say that she was transported. I think Venerable Mary of Agreda herself thought that she didn't go anywhere and that it was her angel that went in her stead. What is your idea about what happened there?
Well, of course, we're dealing with a mystery because most people call this experience that she had bilocation, being in two places at one time. And by the way, many times as bishop, I prayed for that gift, but I never got it. But anyway, she called these mystical experiences coming from God. She realized it's a gift from God, and she would be taken in a mysterious way, a mystical way, into a totally new place, which happened to be thousands and thousands of miles away, into West Texas, New Mexico. So it's hard to explain. We can give it different names. Most people refer to it as bilocation. A number of saints have had this gift of being in two places at one time. not leaving their actual place where they were living at the time as Sor Maria. But Sor Maria, from what I read, is perhaps the person, I call her a saint, who's had the most bilocations of any other in the history of the church, which is marvelous, isn't it?
Mm. I believe it said that she bilocated 500 times. Is that accurate?
At least 500 times, probably more. And she appeared to them as a messenger from God. She started teaching the native people, mainly the Humanos that I've referred to, about God. These people naturally didn't know about the one true God at the time, nor the Trinity. They had a natural religion, which is understandable. They were natives and they were following the gift they had at that time. But they learned very quickly about this new gift that we call Christianity, Catholicism, and the beautiful truths that go with it. And it built on so much of what they had received from God, like you might say, in a natural way, because they are God's people. And she helped them develop the spirit of faith that we know from Catholicism, and to live that life, especially in a sacramental way. So it's a marvelous intervention of God. In the whole history of the United States of America, if you study it, there is no other intervention by God using a woman to appear countless times in different places to bring Christianity. Just recently, past week, we celebrated St. John Beaufait and St. Isaac Joes, two martyrs. But there is no other experience in the whole history of the United States as far as the first evangelization so marvelous as this of the Lady in Blue, Sor Maria de Ágreda, appearing in what we call now Texas and New Mexico, part of Arizona, so many, many times to bring Christ and his message to the native people. It's just a marvelous story, and I'm trying to promote canonization of her because she is a saint in my mind, without a doubt. When I went to Ágreda, you were there, Adrian, I asked the sisters, well, do you know of any miracles she worked? And they kind of smiled. We were talking in Spanish. They said, Padre, obispo, abundan, they abound, because of so many little children that were brought there who were ill, and she would pray over them. And then even after her death, they left a little hole in the wall in the back of the chapel. That's before they removed her body. And the people would come, the mothers, and put their little babies over the tomb, and they would be cured. So it's something I want to continue promoting, because that's part of my area where I was bishop for 28 years through the grace of God. And the bishop succeeding me, Bishop Michael Sis, is also very much involved in developing her cause. Over the years, I made contact with some of the bishops in Spain, because that's where she lived, and that's where the cause should be promoted, because she lived there. And they have done a lot of research. Her cause was held up for different reasons. I'm not sure why. Some in her mystical experiences that led her to write a book called The Mystical City of God. She claims that she had direct revelations from Mary about the life of Jesus. And she'd written these down in a book that's only 800 pages long in Spanish. Now, if you want to do some reading, that's a real challenge. But in that book that she wrote, she brings out how God touched her life and how God, through her, touched the lives of these native people. And I'm still trying with the bishops there, along with Bishop Sis, to promote her cause. And I'm sure one day it will take place. I'd like to point out that she wrote this beautiful book, The Mystical City of God, and it was copied. The King of Spain at the time, Philip IV, received a copy. He read it, heard about this marvelous nun, and he went to visit her, and then they started corresponding, and he did it for the rest of his life with her, exchanging letters. If you visit, you probably saw those, Adrian, when you went to the convent, There's a table, has a glass cover on it. You can see through it, and you can see the actual letters that she and the King of Spain exchanged. And I have read that sometimes she kind of like scolded the king maybe about some of the things he was doing. Mm-hmm. So the king was fascinated by it. The church has picked up on the cause. There are some questions in the mind of some about some of the experiences she is narrating, but I think they can all be explained in accord with what the church teaches and believes. In fact, if you look at the history of the mystical city of God, and I just checked this last night, 8 popes down through the years, 8 popes have given an imprimatur to her work.
Wow.
And several bishops, one is from New Mexico, but several bishops from different places in the world. So I'm sure one day her mystical experiences and the teaching she received from Mary will be recognized by the church. As I read her experiences, I believe fully that, of course, she was in accord with the teaching of the church, without a doubt, with the doctrine of the church, and that her works will be explained. We have to remember, in a natural way, she didn't have much education, I should say, didn't have much natural wisdom, but she had great, great wisdom of the Holy Spirit. And her cause canonization will be promoted first and foremost on the basics for canonization, which is a sanctification, a holy life. And this woman was indeed a very holy woman. The bilocation will be important, but that won't be the primary reason for her canonization. So I keep working on it, and there's a group of people meeting with the Holy Father in a month in Rome, some from San Angelo, some from New Mexico, and the present postulator for her case is going to be there meeting with Pope Francis, and hopefully the Pope will also give more emphasis to her canonization.
Wow. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Joining us right now is Bishop Michael Pfeiffer. He is the retired Bishop of San Angelo, and we're talking about Venerable Mary of Agreda. And, you know, it's one thing that I think is really, really interesting is the fact, because you mentioned about the mystical city of God and the controversies around it. And one of the major controversies about the mystical city of God was the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, which was not a dogma at the time, and recognizing Our Lady as co-redemptrix, the mediatrix of all graces. And I found it very interesting, Your Excellency, that you are a missionary oblate of Mary Immaculate, which kind of, I was like, oh, wow, that's like a match made in heaven right there, a connection between Venerable Mary, those the kind of controversy around that. Did that ever play a role in your spirituality? And what do you think about the whole situation with the Immaculate Conception?
Oh, very much so. She started writing her Mystical City of God when she was about in her early 30s. It took her years to write it, and she wrote it. Now, here's something that's very sad. She wrote because at the direction of her confessor and spiritual director, who said she ought to write down what she said were revelations from Mary about the life of Jesus, and she did. Now, this confessor, this spiritual director, was changed to another city in Spain, and a new priest came in. And you just mentioned this was a time of some turmoil and about credibility in certain people in the church. And the new priest came in and saw this, and he said, "This can't be. A woman couldn't be receiving all this from God." And he commanded her to burn the book, and she did, which is sad. But to me, that makes her a saint that she would obey. And then many years later, when the first spiritual director, the confessor, returned, he asked her to rewrite it, and she did. She started rewriting it sometime when she was about probably 50 years old. And in that, she did from the very beginning, from the revelation she said she received from Mary, that by the gift of God, Mary pointed out that she was conceived without sin, called the Immaculate Conception. Now that was a teaching, but there was different opinions, even among what we call the great scholars of the Dominicans, the Franciscans, and others. St. Thomas Aquinas himself was struggling how to explain this. He believed in it, but he's trying to formulate something about how this could be, since we're all sinners, and how she could be immaculate conceived.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Many committed Christians hold to this axiom: if it's in the Bible, I believe it, and that settles it. Well, here you go. 1 Timothy 2 states the following about women as related to church life: no braiding the hair, no gold jewelry, no pearls, just learn in silence and do not teach. Does your pastor comply with these biblical instructions? Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, an unpleasant fact. Many self-proclaimed Bible-only churches, sadly, will pick and choose what parts of the Bible are implemented in the life of the church. Secondly, Catholic catechism. Be especially attentive to, quote, the content and unity of the whole Scripture. And thirdly, a tough comeback. In order to understand the sacred author's intention, we must take into account culture, audience, and the literary genre. So if your Bible-only church does not strictly obey those instructions, then tell me the reason why. Well, we know. You know, 80% of your church is handled by women. So with those instructions in force, many women will leave your church, maybe even the pastor's wife. Ouch.
I didn't take my faith seriously, which probably means I never really got it to begin with. No, I didn't want to give up sin. I mean, the reason we sin is because sin is fun. But it's self-love sin. But it's amazing with God's grace how easy trying to not sin it really is.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for whatever reason, we invite you to take another look. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
Sometimes when people hear about the Immaculate Conception and Sor Maria, they think we're talking about how Jesus was conceived immaculate. There's no doubt about that, without sin. But it was the teaching of the Church that this woman who gave birth to Jesus, Mary, was conceived immaculately. And well, centuries went by, and then in 1854, the Pope proclaimed Mary's Immaculate Conception. And then 4 years later, in Lourdes, France, when Mary appeared to little Bernadette, and after several apparitions, the local priest had asked her who she is, and she told little Bernadette in French, "Je suis l'Immaculée Conception." Now, little Bernadette didn't understand what that meant, but she kept repeating it, and she ran back to her village and told the priest, and the priest fell on his knees because this little girl could never have heard or understood anything about the Immaculate Conception. So Sor Maria was promoting that already. Not only that, she was promoting the belief that Mary was assumed into heaven, and that was declared as a dogma by Pius XII in 1850. And also about how Mary, because she stood at the cross, she was with Jesus to the end, and that's where Jesus gave her to be our mother, where she, above all people, would be the mediator of helping us to receive God's grace. All graces come from God. When we talk about Mary being a mediatrix, some people confuse and think that she's the source of grace. Well, Mary would say very clearly, it's not me, it's my son. But they come to us through her. So there's marvelous teachings there about doctrine, what have become doctrines in our faith. But maybe I can kind of end on the lighter side. The state flower, you're from Texas, Adrian, and what is the state flower? The bluebonnet, right?
Yes.
Well, the native people have the story about how that bluebonnet came about. They said when she would appear with her blue mantle and it touched the ground, up would spring these beautiful blue flowers. We call them the bluebonnet. So she had She had a role also in some of our what we call our nature, and especially in botany. But that's a marvelous, I think, a marvelous story in itself. I inquired with several botanists, even in Austin, about this story, the origin of the bluebonnet. They didn't know about this story. They found it marvelous, but they couldn't disprove it or prove it either. So,
yeah, I guess it would be kind of difficult to find a good records of the bluebonnet before the coming of the Spaniards into Texas. But praise be to God, I think that's absolutely beautiful story. And I had heard that story before. I think it was something along the lines of like she would go up the hill and then she would disappear. And then when she disappeared, it would leave this ginormous field of bluebonnets wherever she.
Yes.
And then I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. You see, like Our Lady, the woman in blue, and the woman that leaves behind these blue bonnets. A very beautiful thing. Now, one last thing before we run out of time here, I do want to ask about the missionaries that came after. You were telling me before that she had a great influence on people like, when many people won't know, Venerable Antonio Margil, and maybe people like, and maybe more people will be familiar with Saint Junipero Serra. Tell me about that connection.
Well, you mentioned two important missionaries. One has been proclaimed as saints, Junipero Serra, and the other is Father Margil, who founded one of the major missions here in San Antonio. And both of them, they were from Spain, they were Franciscans. They had read her work and they believed in it, and they taught from there. They made it known. And they believed that what was there, of course, were revelations about Christ through Mary and in accord with church doctrine. Father Margil, I think, we need to promote his cause more than we do, especially around the San Antonio area. He also did missionary work in Mexico and also Central America. And of course, Father Junipero Serra, like Father Margil, he had two books he took with him, the Bible and the Mystical City of God, that helped explain how God brings about God's salvation, of course, through Christ, and joined by Mary, the mother of Jesus, and our mother. I'll just point out one other thing. After many years of studying these apparitions, it dawned on me, now, who were these people to whom she appeared? She appeared mainly to what we call the humanos, and there's many descendants. She appeared first and foremost in New Mexico, near what we call today Albuquerque, and she appeared to the humanos, and they were the ones that first received her messages. So I went to study their history of the humanos and found out there were many descendants in my diocese in West Texas. San Angelo is the biggest diocese in Texas as far as territory. And I met with their chieftain, their chairman, they call him today, to hear about their stories. And I found out that they were not recognized by the state of Texas, since they were instrumental in receiving the message from Sor Maria, from God through her. I decided to work on helping these people be recognized by the state of Texas. And I went to work with a couple of Congress people I know, Tom Craddock from Midland, Texas, part of my diocese, and Lou Darby from San Angelo. And I told them that one day I'd like to see if a decree could be issued by the state of Texas recognizing these people. Well, it went through many hoops, went through the Historical Commission, and I got a call one day from Tom Craddock and said, Bishop, we want you to come to Austin because on such and such a day, there's going to be a proclamation read recognizing the Humanos as an official nation in the state of Texas. That thrilled me to no end because for some reason, God chose these people to whom she appeared most of the time, and I thought I ought to do more for them. And I have that decree. Maybe one day I can send it to you.
Amen.
Well, dear, I encourage more people to study and read about the life of this beautiful woman. Pray to her like we pray the saints. Today is All Saints' Day. Pray to her. She's among those saints in heaven. And keep working with me and others to have her officially recognized as a saint in heaven. that will happen.
Now, Your Excellency, how do people, if they want to promote the cause and they want to get involved and they want to help you promote her cause, what can people do and what would you recommend people read?
Well, of course, there's The Mystical City of God, but not many people are going to read it, especially in Spanish. But there's a book put out by, her name just skips me right now, about 5 years ago, by Marilyn Fedewa on the Mystical City of God. That would be a good book. There's also abbreviated versions of the Mystical City of God. I have one in front of me now. Just let me put it on the screen here. It was written by a man, a good Catholic man, Philip Sheridan. Does this come in on there?
Yes.
Philip Sheridan, who went through, he read the book. He's a historian. He was a superintendent of school, and he wrote this abridged version. And back in 2014, he asked me to write the introduction to it. So I would encourage people to try to find books like this to read about her. And of course, pray to her. There's prayers. And to learn more about her, because she had a deep influence on the state of Texas for Catholicism, and of course the other parts of the Southwest in the United States today. So to encourage people to pray to her, you could either through me or the present Bishop of San Angelo, Bishop Michael Sis, prayer cards could be acquired. I have written many articles about her that are on file in San Angelo. Bishop Sis has written about her. So that would be a starting point for most people. When many people hear the lady in blue, they think about our Blessed Mother. Well, Mary's favorite color, they say, is blue, but Mary is, of course, the saint of saints and our mother, and Mary is also recognized by the color blue, but the lady in blue pertains to this wonderful young religious, Sor Maria de Ágreda de Jesús.
Amen. Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. Could you leave us with your Episcopal blessing?
Yes, and I'd like to issue the blessing with this cross that was given to me by Pope St. John Paul II, who 39 years ago named me a bishop, and I found out early on that he and I had the same birthday.
Oh, wow.
I got to know him very well. I had many visits with him. He remembered me very well. And I'd like to extend a blessing to all of you through the cross he gave me, and ask that we would all imitate, of course, the life of this great saint, too. He was proclaimed a saint with Pope John the 23rd back in 2015, I believe it was. So let me extend a blessing to all of you, and asking our Blessed Mother to help us be faithful to Christ as she was, and Sor Maria. So receive this blessing on All Saints' Day, and may it help you to live your lives in a saintly way and to imitate those who have gone before us, because if we do, then one day we will be saints in heaven again. So Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, your Son, I ask you to listen to his prayer to pour out upon us your powerful blessing, especially of the Holy Spirit that you want all of us to receive. Keep us to be faithful to you, our loving God, and faithful to the teachings of our church, and faithful to follow the example of our Blessed Mother and Sor Maria de Ágreda and all the saints. So may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit come upon you and remain forever and ever. Amen. And I say, Viva Cristo Rey!
Que viva!
Viva la Virgen de Guadalupe!
Que viva!
Viva la Dama Azul! Viva! God bless you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And that's going to do it. Praise be to God. If you could join us in the next segment, then please do. We'll be right back with more Catholic Drive Time.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us, just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.